Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Purpose Tuned podcast. The goal of this show is to create valuable content to broaden your knowledge, inspire you to act, and get you in the right mindset so you can apply it in your own life to drive impact, generate meaning, and achieve your purpose. Now, today's guest is Lynn Yap. Lynn is the founder of Activate Network, whose mission is to increase the inclusion of women in technology and entrepreneurship. She started her career as a corporate attorney, graduated from the Wharton School with an MBA, and worked in investment banking and innovation strategy. Her curiosity led her to write a book about leading business as a force for good. The Altruistic Capitalist is a accumulation of her conversations with leaders at for-profit organizations, entrepreneurs, and investors, and her personal experience. Within the book, you will find ideas to incorporate practices within your workplace to create a positive impact and profit. Lynn, thank you so much for joining us today. How are you doing?
I'm doing very well. Thank you very much for having me on the show, Carl.
Yeah, I'm so glad that you're on. I'd love to learn more about your experiences, what led you to write this book. But first of all, let's start off with you telling us more about your background.
So I have a very traditional business background. I graduated from Wharton with an MBA and then worked in investment banking. But when I was there, I found that something was missing in my life. So if I may share a little personal story, when I was working in investment banking, I was doing a lot of IPOs. And one of the IPOs I worked on was Facebook. At that time, everybody wanted to work on Facebook's IPO because it was the largest IPO of all times, and we all wanted to, be on that S1 cover and brag that, hey, we did Facebook. So, but at that same time, my grandmother was in Malaysia and she was not feeling well. The doctors felt that she might not make it. So I asked if I could go back, if I could go back and see her in Malaysia. Living in New York and going back to Malaysia, it takes at least a day to get there. So I wanted to be away for at least a week, just to spend some time with her. Long story short, I was just told that I couldn't go. There wasn't even a consideration. It was just like, no, you can't go. Facebook can go public anytime, and we need you here to make sure that everything goes accordingly. And so I was very much torn between what my duty to my family and my duty to work. I felt responsible for the deal, and in the end, I decided to stay. And my grandmother passed. And so that kind of started me on the path of thinking as well. If people are so important to our business, why don't we see the impact of our actions at work on the financial statements? We don't see how we treat our employees in the rows of financial data that are in financial statements. So it got me thinking, like, okay, what will it look like if businesses were a force for good? They did better by their employees, with the community, with the environment, and it just kind of got me started down this track and led me to where I am now. So I founded Activate Network, that is trying to increase the participation of women in technology and entrepreneurship. And I also wrote this book in the last 12 months while I was in lockdown, like most of us, to encourage and inspire other business leaders to do good with their work. So that's just me in a nutshell. I hope that didn't take up too much time.
No, not at all. I love that. Having a personal story to your your life is important because it really adds color and richness. And I really could sympathize with your point about people in business. Without employees, there wouldn't be business. And so I work in the HR space, in the leadership development, people development space, and I get that idea. Why do we treat employees as if they're just a number or a transaction when they are the lifeblood of our company? They are the purpose of the business. Without the people, there would not be business. And so I completely can relate to that. And I'm glad that you realize that and are doing something about it. So, of course, the show is about purpose. What does purpose mean to you, and how does it show up in your life?
So purpose, it's a big word, right? But I think that's very personal what it means to different people. For me, it is something that gets you excited, that you're very passionate about. It is also something where you can add value to the world. So it is something that you would spend your time and energy and resources in the service of others. I think when you have purpose in your life and you work on that, you are able to overcome many challenges that you face along the way. So
Mm,
that's what purpose means to me.
yeah, that's great. And do you use that to guide you through challenging times? What's your process around when you're faced with situations that are just you feel like it's difficult and you may not see the light of it? Like, what's your process around that?
I think remembering what my purpose is, and for me, it's helping other women to achieve their dreams, to achieve their biggest potential. I've had the good fortune of having a good education, have a good family support and friends to help me get to where I am today. And I want to enable other women to achieve their dreams and to be bigger than who they are as well.
Mm,
So keeping purpose in mind helps me when days are hard, and there are hard days,
mm,
to just look, okay, this is just the next step, because look what I would be achieving.
mm,
So for instance, in my work with Activate, it's a leadership and mentoring program where I introduce female role models to female students in school. And when I see the impact, and you can notice that in when you speak to a student and you see a change, a light change in their eyes, that she all of a sudden realizes how important she is because you're investing that time in her.
mm.
That is always worth it for me to, no matter how hard it gets, no matter how difficult it is, to know that you have made a difference in somebody else's life. You have changed the way you that she sees herself. That all of a sudden she realizes she can do so much more because someone else is invested in her future.
Yeah, that's powerful. So I've had my fair share of mentors throughout my career, and it's so important to have someone to guide me through the stages of my professional life. Without them, I don't think I would be where I am today. And they bring so much, uh, wealth of knowledge and inspiration. So it's important that we have organizations like yours to help, especially the young generation, think about these things at an early age so that they can be set up for success. Uh,
Mhm.
so I want
I
to go
think
back.
it's like an accelerator effect. The earlier that you give them the guidance, the more impact that you have in a person's life. You really just that's why early education is so important, right?
Right, exactly. Yes, the early impact, and all of that is so important. So I have six sisters, and I understand the challenges that women face. Um, in the workplace. Not 100%, just to clarify, but I do hear a lot about these challenges that my sisters face in the workplace as a female. And so I'm so glad that you recognize that there's a need um, for this in communities, and that society needs to change in the way how they hire and develop and retain women in the workforce. And so having a diversity, equity, inclusion background, and having been engaged in tough conversations with business leaders on how to attract, recruit, and retain talent, it's a work in progress. And when you're speaking to business leaders that have always done it this way, and to get their minds to change and say, look, we have to think about business differently, and to get them to understand that based on data and research, that a diverse workforce leads to innovation and growth, and that's good for business. And so what's your take on that concept of innovation in business, and how women play in that space?
That's a really good question, Pong. And I definitely believe in diversity for innovation and creativity within teams. And it's not just diversity from a gender perspective, it's from all perspectives, right? The ability to, when you have diverse teams, the ability for each one to feel safe, to create that safe space where everyone can contribute their ideas and their opinions, there will be that friction that is so healthy to come up with solutions, innovative solutions that solve a particular problem. The other thing I want to add as well, the importance of having more women in the workforce. And we are at one of our lowest women participation in our labor market in 3 decades because of the COVID situation. 1 in every 4 women are thinking of leaving their work because of the additional responsibilities that they've taken on during the pandemic to care for it, whether it's homeschooling or to care for a family member. A lot of women now are choosing to leave. And that is, we won't have that senior leadership, women's senior leadership that we need then to create that diversity. That means we're also losing money because we have a part of our labor market that is not contributing to our GDP. So it is not just it is clearly quite measurable. If you don't have this group of people participating in the market, we are losing a proportion of our economy. So it's both economic, it's creating innovation and creativity that is so important for work culture and for team building.
Yeah, work culture and team building and employee engagement and all of that. Speaking of employee engagement, why is it important for businesses to do good?
Few reasons right now. There is, of course, social media. Let's start with that. You can't escape from social media right now. We as consumers, as individuals, we expect we can see what's going on in a company through Twitter, through Instagram, name your social media platform, right? And that means that everything is transparent to us as an individual. And what can happen if something is not, if the business is not doing right, if it's not authentic, an individual knows. I'm going to bring up the example of United. I don't know if you recall, there was an episode where a passenger was dragged off the plane, and that video was taken of the passenger being taken off the plane, dragged, and caused a huge huge ruckus on social media. And what happened was the stock fell the next day because people just didn't like what United Airlines stood for. And so one of the reasons then is we as individuals, as consumers, we want to support businesses that are good by doing good by the environment and doing good by a community, doing good by our employees and by our customers. So I think that is one reason, because everything is so transparent right now. And secondly, we demand it, right? We are more educated, we are more conscious of who we buy from, who we work with, and who we want to do business with. We want to work with companies who are ethical, who protect the environment, who protect their employees, and who contribute to the community. That companies just need to do good, or what we call now stakeholder capitalism, because that is what us as consumers, employees, members of community, that's what we're demanding for.
So you mentioned stakeholder capitalism. For those listeners who may not know what that is, could you explain what is stakeholder capitalism and what are the emerging trends surrounding that?
Thank you very much. I'm sorry, I just mentioned that and I didn't explain it. So stakeholder capitalism is a term that has been bandied around for a while. In general, what is being taught in business schools came from Milton Friedman in an article that he wrote in the New York Times in the 70s, saying that the responsibility of a company is to take care of shareholders, and which is called shareholder capitalism, right? It's basically profits. But that taken to extreme has resulted in a lot of social problems. So what is now emerging is stakeholder capitalism. That means taking care of all stakeholders, not just investors and shareholders of the company. Stakeholders of a business, it's your employees, your customers, your suppliers, the community, and the environment. And that it's a silent stakeholder, but it's a stakeholder no less. And what the World Economic Forum has come up with in the last, let's call it last 6 months or so, are a couple of metrics in which you can measure stakeholder capitalism. How well are you doing by your employees? How well are you doing by the community? What are your governance standards? What is your structure, organizational structure, to make sure that that you're behaving in an ethical way? There is also conversations with these metrics that they've developed to incorporate that into standard reporting standards. So going back to what my original story about my grandmother and how it triggered the thought as to, well, if employees are so important to a business, why don't we see the impact in our standard reporting, right? Our standard financial statements. And that change is coming, I believe it's coming right quite soon, that we will see that incorporated into standard reporting, standard financial statements. How is a company doing in terms of diversity, pay gaps, environmental carbon emissions, contribution to economic growth, how many jobs are you creating? Those are the different measures that are being introduced in stakeholder capitalism metrics, which is going to be quite interesting to see. It can be, it will require some time, I think, for people to really understand what all of the metrics mean and setting up the systems to abide by them.
So say for a social entrepreneur or a business executive, like what do they need to do to lead in a stakeholder capitalism environment?
That's a good question. And stakeholder capitalism, it's new because it's complex because you have to manage, by definition, you have to manage multiple stakeholders. I think the first step is always to know purpose, going back to Going back to your question, what is your purpose? What is it that what is important to you as an as a business executive, as the leader of your business, as the founder of your business, and what you're good at. I think once you understand that, then you are able to build out the strategy, build out the structure, build out the incentives that align with the entire purpose. Because well, I may think that it's good to, and I think it's important to protect the planet and all of that, but I'm not going, if my skill set is more in terms of increasing diversity in organizations, I have, with my limited resources, I am not going to invest in building up a team that is related to the circular economy, for instance. I might partner with another organization whose skill set is more aligned with that, and that where we match up. But I'm not going to invest my resources in doing everything that's under the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals, because that doesn't make sense. I think stakeholder capitalism, where you start, is understanding your purpose, which also involves knowing what you're good at, what the organization is good at, and what they're passionate about, and working towards that, and aligning it with the right partners. That's the second step, aligning it with the right partners. Because you may find like certain shareholders, well, they are interested in something a little bit different, and that may be short-term profits. That's okay. That might be their choice, right? And that is their choice. And then you align yourself with investors and shareholders that, well, is maybe, in my case, interested then in increasing diversity, in closing the gender pay gap, in investing more in learning and development for their workforce, for instance. So you align yourself with the different partners, the different suppliers, and also your employees, which increases engagement and commitment across the stakeholder platform.
That's fascinating. So what inspired you to do all of this work? It seems like it's a large challenge for organization to really meet the needs of various stakeholders. It's not just shareholders anymore. It's all of those things that you mentioned: the employees, the customers, the environment, shareholders included.
Good question.
I guess why choose this work, and what inspired you to do it?
What inspired me to take down this path? Well, I think it's just when I first started Activate, it was just one cohort, and I saw the impact that I could have on another person's life. And you may want to call it like egoistic or something, but I felt really good that I was able to help another person, and I see the value in businesses having the scale to then scale the impact that they have on others.
That's great. I love that. So congratulations on writing the book, as well as your organization. You're obviously an entrepreneur. What advice would you share to those who are paving their own path to entrepreneurship?
Good question. And I spoke to lots of entrepreneurs for my book as well, particularly impact entrepreneurs. I want to say there are a few things that I found in common with them. One, firstly, having a network, a strong, committed network to help you scale, to help you overcome challenges, but also to build relationships and give back to each other, right? I think that is really quite important. Secondly, when times are difficult, I've mentioned this before, just focus on the next step. It's sometimes our the things that we want to solve, like, oh, I want to make sure that we get to a 50-50 world, right? That everybody has equal access and equal opportunity. That seems very insurmountable. Similar to people who is trying to stop the planet from burning up. It's like, oh my God, it's such a big problem. What is important, I think, in not just impact entrepreneurs, but also executives, just focus on the next step. What is the next step that I can take, that I can control? And so that's number two. And I think number three, and probably quite important, we forget that a lot of times, particularly as entrepreneurs, we forget to take care of ourselves. I think mental and physical health is so important. If that goes away, everything just basically goes away. I found in my research that if you set aside a certain time to take care of yourself each day, whether it's physical exercise, even meditation or mindfulness, where you basically just take time for yourself, I think that really helps puts you in a good place, that starts you off in a good mindset, that can take care of it, that can take care of most of the things that show up in the rest of the day. So I think for me, that is probably one of the more important things.
What are some of the aha moments you've had in your entrepreneur journey? And yeah, let's start there.
I guess, and maybe this is something that is probably quite obvious, always deliver value for whoever it is. It might be your end customer, it might be the students I trying to support achieve their dreams. Always try and put yourself in their perspective and what is most valuable to them. Sometimes that involves asking, just plain asking. It's like, what is how can I help you? How can I give you value? And work from there. Sometimes what we think is the idea, what they want, it's not really what they want and need. So putting yourself in their position or asking the right questions helps you get to the right solution faster.
Right. Yeah. I mean, I certainly have had a lot of those aha moments where it's like, you're sort of, because you're so busy and you're essentially building a plane while you're flying it, and you want shortcuts because your mind can only handle so much. And when you assume things, that's where things could go wrong. And so it's always good to have the intent, the clarity, and asking the right questions.
Yeah.
That's a great reminder for everyone who are currently working, to keep those points in mind. So the book that we touched on earlier during the conversation, why did you, of all things, choose to write a book?
Good question. I guess for me, a couple of reasons. Why a book? I think a book, to a certain extent, leaves a legacy behind. It's there. It's permanent, and it leaves it is something that people can read and immerse themselves in the topic. And also for myself, upon reflection, after I wrote the book, I realized it was one of the best ways to actually learn about the topic, because for that whole period, I was just in that space the whole time, learning from others, learning from published research, learning from other interviews and other books. So it's just a different process, because you're taking in so much information, processing it with my own experience and my own understanding, and then trying to teach someone else about what I've learned. So that is quite a rich and powerful learning experience, a little different than, let's say, going to school and you absorb from the professor and then you just take an exam and you just call it a day, perhaps. So it's a slightly different learning experience, and I found quite enriching. But this was upon hindsight. And then the other thing, why a book? I am someone who, I'm generally motivated and driven. I like challenges, and writing a book, publishing a book was one of those things on my bucket list. Is like, I'm going to write a book. and it just happened that I thought, well, I'm stuck indoors, but good time as any to actually get this done and check off my list. So yeah, I decided I will do this in lockdown. It's a lot more work than I originally thought, and I've learned so much in so many different areas, from doing research to conducting interviews to reaching out to people to writing on social media. And writing a book is a completely different way, how you structure your ideas, how you process things, how you reflect. So yeah, I am very grateful that I went on this, that I put myself on this challenge. That turned out to be more difficult than I expected, but I'm quite glad that I finished it. Yeah, and I think the journey is just starting, because there's so much more that I want to write and share, because I'm continuing to learn about the space, about the topic.
Could you share with us, when you're writing your book, like what were some of the things that you had interacted with, I don't know, these clients of yours or these folks, your network? Like what was the story? Like what was the, if we were to ask you what is your book, like what is it? Could you share with us like some of the things that were important?
Yeah, so when I started the book, I wanted to learn from people who are successful creating sustainable, prosperous businesses. And it didn't, there were a few people who were from my network, people I interviewed, but then how I went about it was, I said, hey, is there someone else that you would recommend me to speak to, who would be able to contribute to this book as well? And that just opened up so much more to my learning, because then it wasn't part of my echo chamber, if you like. I was then meeting different people and learning from them, from their experience. So it was super interesting, because I was, for example, quite surprised at a number of people who had some sort of mindfulness practice in this space. I guess being intentional, knowing their purpose, and knowing what is important to them from a value system, that was quite consistent in my interviews. And it wasn't like I just went out and talked to people who meditate. It wasn't like a thing. I just set out to. I actually posted it on LinkedIn, and it's like, hey, I am writing this book about leaders who do good and create profit. Is there anyone that you recommend to me? And people that I didn't know, strangers, just came up and said, hey, you should speak to this person and that. And that was quite fascinating. Very scary for me to do it. It was quite a learning experience.
That's awesome. I mean, the courage to ask publicly, and also the guts it must take to write a book. I mean, that's just crazy. I mean, you should be proud of yourself, of the accomplishments you've had. Speaking of accomplishments, what are some of these success habits that you possess?
Success habits. I have a daily habit of writing, of journaling. I just learned this recently as well, of a structure. I just learned of this structure recently. What are some of the creative ideas I have during the day? what are some of the cues that to look out for? For instance, if there's something that's recurring, and lessons learned. I think the practice of journaling and writing each day helps with the learning process. And that kind of leads me to the second success habits, which I like challenges. I like doing experimenting and learning and doing different things. And perhaps that has led to me being involved in having worked in so many different areas, from law to investment banking to innovation strategy, and right now, starting my own business, having my own business. I think just being curious and wanting to learn and wanting to be challenged is something that has helped me get to where I am right now. And the third one, this probably came a bit later in my life. Asking for help. that always as a child, I was told, you need to be independent, you need to rely on yourself and all of that. Don't depend on anyone. But we as a human race, we are so connected with others. And consider that asking someone else for help, you're allowing someone else to give and to perhaps feel joy from the ability to give. And so asking for help is not a weakness, but a sign of strength, because it takes courage to also ask someone and say, hey, I'm struggling right now. Can you help me with this?
Yeah, that's important. And, I think for many of us, I don't know if it's majority of us, but many of us, it almost has to do with, and I'm guilty of this too, our ego. It's like, if we ask for help, it's like, okay, it's that we may seen as, or be perceived as not as smart or talented, or, it's a doubt of our ability. And it's actually the reverse. It's actually you're displaying humility and, authenticity, and that's connection to be extended to someone who can actually offer you their expertise. And it also gives the other person the opportunity to almost fulfilled their purpose, because they're helping another person. That leads to impact means purpose and meaning, and so it's so important. And I love that.
Exactly.
And we're about that time. So where can people find you should they choose to connect with you?
So you can find me at altruisticcapitalist.com. On Instagram, it's the same, Altruistic Capitalist. So you can find me there, sign up for a newsletter or send me a direct message on Instagram. And I'm always looking for people to exchange ideas with, what you're struggling with at work, to help each other and support each other through our journey. So I look forward to hearing from you.
That's awesome. Thank you so much, Lynn. Folks, if you enjoyed this episode and would love to connect with Lynn, you know where to find her. Thank you so much for spending your time listening to this podcast. And please do subscribe to my channel, like and comment, and share widely with your friends and family. And I'll see you at our next episode. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Colin.